Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. As we go into May, I'm reminded of how far mental health has come since the early turn of the 20th century to where we are today. However, there's still so much work left to be done. Last month, I mentioned an African proverb I feel is also relevant this month's theme. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. This month's theme is remembering our names. Remember our names is a response I felt having struggled in my life with mental health issues. The idea stems from that mental health issues are inconvenient. At the very least, those who have suffered and those who are trying to support those who are suffering. And sometimes, unfortunately, we don't ask certain questions. There's obviously several factors that kind of play a role in someone getting appropriate help. Unfortunately, like I said, the question that we don't ask often is why we even care about mental health. Um, but I feel it stems from a very simple, at least from my insight, my experience. We care about mental health simply because of people who are suffering. So, the visual suffering may be a daughter, son, wife, husband, parent, or a parent whose quality, as those who are supporting or trying to help those who are suffering, their value doesn't diminish, but it does get overwhelming, and we may lose sight of why mental health matters. And sometimes, unfortunately, the mental health condition supersedes the person's identity, can do this, and also their value. Instead, I encourage in this month, I did last year, and I love the simplicity of it, is just remembering our names, speaking from the point of those who are suffering, but instead of remembering their names and their lives first. Today, I will be sharing my insight. That is, um, I misspelled that. Today I will be sharing my insight on my experience of regarding mental health and how, um, and just remembering this day. For one, I understand that if one hasn't been touched or doesn't have context to really, I guess, feel much urgency when there's so many other things. Well, there are, um, and I guess that's also part of the reason this month is important. There are a lot of things that people are suffering, but today, um, a lot of times, if we don't remind ourselves, we may forget why it is important. So today, like I said, I'll be sharing my insight and reasons why mental health matters for me. And disclaimer: if you are in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help immediately. 988 is a suicide crisis lifeline available to those in the States, but wherever you live around the world, whatever groups you belong to, if you're an adult, tell a friend, tell a coworker, tell someone. Um, Along those lines, I know last month I used this quote from Mark Twain: kindness is a language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. Like I said, I use this quote, but I feel this quote is relevant as we discuss mental health. We first must talk about how we treat the people suffering around us today. I remember an organization that I'm still have some ties to is NAMI, Nationalized Mental Illness, and with NAMI, it's interesting. It's a grassroots organization that stem from mothers feeling that they wanted to advocate for their sons or daughters who are struggling with mental health, and uh, I feel that and now it's one among others organizations that provide education, and not only that, it provides a way for um, peers to those who are struggling to find a, a way to bridge that communication or even connect with those who are also suffering. Robert Williams says it this way: everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always. Robert Williams is a haunting reminder of this. Such a at least those who see him at a distance, obviously in the idea through movies, he's always been so um, energetic. Seemed that he was very happy, brought people to laugh. But it's a reminder that even the people that around you, they feel like they have it all together, or maybe they're just such a uplifting presence in your group setting. At the same time, we may assume that they're doing well, but all it takes is sometimes a question: how are you doing, so and so? So I do feel sometimes we assume things a lot. So but especially nowadays, at least from my standpoint, I feel even if someone's great at whatever it is, just reminding them that they are appreciated is a big step. um Along those lines, like I mentioned with NAMI and other organizations, the idea of support groups can be, and this is just one way, but for to address this unheardness. Many times, in my experience, mental health communities, I've heard about the feeling of not being heard. Yeah, and I myself experienced that, and for me, it's intangible because the rational thought is, well, you are getting your basic needs met. And granted, if we're always looking at the negative reinforcement that, oh, I'm not on the street, I have food, I have this, but a lot of times with mental health, it can bleed into your motivation, your value, and a lot of other components that may not seem ever present on the surface, but those who have suffered may understand the ideas that it doesn't feel the same. So, for instance, I use this example as a hypothetical kind of situation, but I've felt and seen this in different ways. A family member who is suffering with mental health issues um, has a lot of tangible support, but no social support. So the family may find ways to give him the securities that a lot of people won't. That's wonderful, but at the same time, the person's not getting a lot of these mental health or some of the support addressed. So it may seem like that the person is insensitive or not appreciative, but when someone is having mental health issues, it's something that no one will understand except the individual. And that's why it's so important about the communication part. But on top of that, it's also just getting the person's stuff doesn't really address the real issue. And I feel that's where it's very can be very frustrating for families and those trying to support those who are struggling, because you're like, well, I've done this. A lot of times, unfortunately, it's beyond the tangible, and there is also ownership of the people who are struggling to um, also make that effort towards communicating or getting the help they need. So it is not just one side or the other, but the idea of not being heard is also a component of that failure of communication. Maya Angelou, um, I feel this quote express the intangible support that I feel sometimes we overlook. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. People will never, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So, a lot of times I hear from different groups, oh, um, feelings are in, feelings are just feelings. Well, true, but um, I feel in a sense they're in the idea of being led by our feelings. Sure, and this we could get ourselves in a lot of trouble. However, feelings indicate that something is may need to change or something needs to be addressed. So I do feel that this quote kind of inspires a type of support sometimes that um, we sometimes overlook. So um, the way we are present with someone, you don't have to have a mental health issue to understand grief. We went through COVID. A lot of people have lost people that are close to them. Um, just checking on someone simply, not assuming that maybe someone who's well adjusted, maybe the life of the party, maybe that person is not doing so well. On top of that, also remembering that you don't know what they're going through, and even just the idea that even though you feel that uh, that they're doing fine, it's always is a good reminder, especially when we talk about support, that we don't assume anything. So I tried to remember to appreciate the ones around me. Don't assume anything. Um, and also, if I'm reminded, if someone reaches out or needs something, and I say I will call them back, I'll say I will call them back. I don't want to make my life so busy that is ineffective for the people around me. The fact of the matter is, the fact that I'm busy does not dismiss me from connecting from those around me. So if I cannot, per se, give that level of support, I try to make it a point to express that and also kind of refer that person to some support that I may not be able to give. But I guess that's where the community comes together in a way. We had last month, it was finding our community, and it's not one person doing everything. We've seen the burnout in various professions. We've seen that not only in professions, but in our faith based community. People just get overworked, unable to say no. And sometimes there are systems in place that make you feel that you can't. I want to share some inspirational quotes of those for those struggling with mental health issues. Nito Kubin says, "Your present circumstances do not determine where you go; they merely determine where you start." Sometimes we get overwhelmed of the should-have statements. Um, though we may be discouraged, and understandably, we may make mistakes. Um, a lot of times, it's not very that very effective in a sense of finding help, because we can get a little bit stuck. So I do like this quote just because um, you know grounding ourselves, understanding that whatever we're in doesn't mean we have to stay there. Um, Brian Brown says, vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. So, obviously, encouraging those, none of this is convenient. There's no pill, there's no that will erase everything. There's so much context when someone is struggling. So I would say this relates to me. I feel there's a lot of strength and courage when it comes to vulnerability. The world will say you are weak. You should have taken care of yourself better. Why are you sad? You're doing well. You know, look at me. I'm doing XYZ. However, it's kind of insensitive in the sense that, going back to what Robin Williams says, everyone's you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And even if the individual who's struggling tries to explain it, you'll only hear it from the context and from the angle that you're at that given moment. So I do find that, going back to the very beginning, that kindness, how we treat one another, when I think about remember our names, it's a lot of where that stems from. Because a lot of us remember names, but what does that name really mean to us? And how does that connect to the idea of mental health? So, moving forward, Jonathan Harnish: the strongest people are not those who show strength in front of the world, but those who fight and win battles that others do not know anything about. I feel a lot of times, if there is a need for this external approval, we can get caught up in it. And it can be, at least from my experience, can be more detrimental to those who are suffering mental health. I just remember many a times when I was really struggling that I would want to share and explain, because I want kind of some understanding that someone could get it. Now, I'm just speaking from my perspective. I know everyone comes from different avenues of thought, but from my perspective, I realized that wasn't very helpful for me. And the reason was because no one will truly understand. So what's next? That's the question I asked to myself at that time. It's a question I asked in the line of work I'm in today. What is next? And for me, it was the micro decisions. And I started to just do. Now, is this a foolproof solution for those who are out there? No, not at all, really. But I learned to first not get caught up in whatever, not get caught up with what I was struggling with. So, following obviously treatment, being communicative to my providers and those who are helping me at that given time, and understanding that people will not understand me. And during a time when I felt invisible, during a time where I felt people didn't truly get why I was stuck, I began to realize the negative thoughts that I began to experience were not helping. So, and at the same time, all those kind of reaching out moments, trying to have people to understand, it depleted my energy, depleted myself. Obviously, going through all that I went through, there was very little time at that moment for me, in the sense of what was next. And part of that was finding and learning a little bit about myself, and understanding that, not getting frustrated that people don't understand, but being a little bit forgiving for myself and the situation where I was at the time, and also forgiving for those who were around me trying the best they could. It was not 1, 2, 3. It wasn't something I learned. It's something I'm learning. We want to connect, but unfortunately, sometimes we assume that people will understand, and you'll feel that kind of camaraderie. But when it comes to mental health, it is a lonely journey. However, what was very much a turning point for me was when I was able to work on these little things and continue to grow. And I started to ask more questions, better questions, and kept going. I've been hurt several ways from people being insensitive or diminishing my value because of whatever they assumed I had. I've been in various levels, leadership, church, which a lot of times, because of the unknown, I've felt some resistance. However, through all those experiences, I'm here today. I'm and I am it is the process. I think I said this before. I use basketball a lot, but so I'll use it again. If I was a basketball player and the whole goal is to be MVP, NBA championship, and I was in high school, that was my goal. And yes, that having those goals, but it's the habits that get us there. So if I don't enjoy the habits, if I'm unreasonable and unforgiving and I'm working towards it, the sad truth is two things may happen that may be first, I may not get there. And then the question I ask is, does that make me less valuable? That's the first question. Second thing is, and the more tragic thing is, I may hate basketball because of this way of looking at the sport. Um, I do my best work slowing down. So the process, enjoying, embracing the process, I feel has been my, I guess, one of the major things that helped me with my mental health. Um, I say this to not only myself, people I work with. Um, if it takes you 45 minutes, if you know you're gonna have a bad day, you notice that things are not right, and before I start saying in my head, "Oh, this shouldn't be this way," I've been doing so good. This shouldn't be this way. I would say I've learned to say, do the 45 minutes. Do whatever will help me, because the should have point thoughts, at least from my context, are usually very negative, and from a standpoint from someone who doesn't understand why it's important that I do that. Take that 45 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. There's a Chinese proverb that says, a bird does not sing because it has an answer, it sings because it has a song. A lot of people think, and when I look at this, just for me, I think our songs are how we navigate. Like our song, it doesn't mean that everything you do will ultimately lead to some conclusion or some answer, but we do have a song to sing. And a lot of our songs, the good ones, at least, let's say it this way, are the ones that are uh, the ones about us, in the sense about who we are, our names, our self, not about what. I'm using songs as a context of life, so I feel a lot of times we can be effective, we can make steps, but don't, I would say, in essence, um, find a way that the process itself becomes something that you can consistently work towards. And for me, it's been communication, it's been many other things, but I do find there's a lot of depth to this proverb that I'm still discovering. I like music, um, and I like the idea that we are in a generation that we pride ourselves from being super busy. We pride ourselves on how, we look at Instagram, we look at all these social media platforms, and we see other people's lives in a snapshot that are usually not as accurate as we would like to make out. And this is not to rip into social media. It is there. I'm not saying anything at that point, but what I'm saying is we live in a world that we want things to happen fast, conveniently, and quickly. And the more busy we are, the more valued we are. Now, stepping back, thinking about mental health, a lot of times the person may be struggling to the point where they can't do a lot of things they used to can do. And that in itself feels like more heavyweight. So they want to rush. They want to go, as in the beginning, they want to go fast. But a lot of times, we unfortunately, even the most independently capable person still needs some support. And in mental health, you cannot talk about it without discussing that support. So in a sense, I do think about this proverb. I think about the African proverb. I think about just how we relate to this world and those who are suffering with mental health. Remembering our names brings back a lot of times, and I'll say from my standpoint, it brings back the humanity that we give out. We are not our quote unquote, and you heard this a lot, we are not our diagnosis, but we are not also devalued because of it. I think a lot of times we forget how short life is. We forget how much we are we're stuck on questions that may not be solvable. But what can you do today? Maybe you could be kinder to those who are around you. Maybe the person you need to be kind to is yourself. But as you could see, mental health is complicated. So remember, the identity of a person who is struggling does not stem from the mental health condition, but rather the individual themselves, their names. I feel I use names a lot because it's one of the first things that are given to you. And really individualize that person. So I know it's coined a lot. Not to say it doesn't have its challenges, but in the sense of how it attaches itself to our value. Mental health, unfortunately, has a hard time separating the two. A person with schizophrenia does not mean they're less valued. A person with bipolar or any of these disorders doesn't mean that they're less valued. Forget the diagnosis. Those are for the providers. Those are for the treatment. Those are for the medication and what may be helpful. Forget about all that and remember their name. That is my final thought. But as we wrap up, I just want to tell those who are listening, remember to stay updated with all things Revive Ministry through those various platforms. ReviveMinistryFL.com is our website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast, leaving you with the last quote, and it's from Malcolm S. Forbes. Too many people overvalue what they are not and undervalue what they are.